When it comes to ARRMA, I am a bit of a fanboy. Now I know a lot of people are put off by the high prices of the 6S and the 8S ARRMA range, and when you factor in the cost of batteries as well, that price rapidly increases. So wouldn't it be great to have something that looks like an ARRMA but is super cheap? Well, I think I may have found you a good solution. So here in front of me I have two brand new cheap RC cars, and as you can see, both of these are inspired by the ARRMA Outcast. Now while both of these trucks look the part, that is pretty much where it stops for one of them. So the first one here is the SMRC S910. It's a 1/16 scale and you can buy it in a brushed or a brushless version. The brushed version, which comes with a very nice black and pink colour scheme, costs around £60 or $75, and the brushless white version, which is the one I have here, is £87 or $110. Moving on to this one, and this one is slightly larger. This is the JJRC Q146, and this one is 1/14 scale. Now as far as I'm aware, you can only buy this in a brushed version. They don't offer a brushless one yet, but I may be wrong, and it wouldn't be the first time. Price wise, this one costs £73 or $91, which actually isn't a bad price at all, but that's as long as it performs well. Of course we're going to take a much closer look at both of these trucks, but first we need to take a look at what we get in the box, and let's start with this one. So we'll start with the transmitter then. Now this thing does feel kind of plasticky. It does look a lot like the Pinecone Models transmitters, but yeah, it just feels a little bit cheap. Now you've got your usual adjustments on there, your steering trim, steering dual rate and throttle dual rate. You've got a nice foam grip on the wheel, but even the trigger doesn't feel very smooth. You will need 3 AA batteries to get you up and running. Battery wise, we've got a 2S 1500 mAh lithium ion, decal sheets and an instruction manual telling you where to place them. I've gone for the pink decals on mine because I think they look really cool. We've also got a screwdriver and a spare parts bag. It looks like there's also a cross wrench in there, your typical cheap ready to run USB charger, and finally a black and white instruction manual which doesn't have exploded diagrams, but you do get all the parts listed at the back. So starting with the transmitter then, now if you thought the first one was a bit cheap looking, well this is even worse. I don't really like the design of this, it just feels toy-like. Now we do get our steering trim adjustment as you can see there, and it does say dual rate on the other side, but I don't know if that's for the steering or for the throttle. We do get a foam grip on the wheel, and this one will need 4 AA batteries to get you running. Yeah, I have to say I'm not a huge fan of this one, and it does feel super cheap. Again, we've got our typical cheap RC car USB charger, a screwdriver which does come with 2 different bits, and the battery for this one is pretty much exactly the same as the last one. It's a 2S 1500 mAh lithium ion. Now finally we've got the black and white manual. Now this one is kind of more in depth compared to the last one. With this one we get exploded diagrams and it just seems a little bit better. So now we've got that bit out of the way, we're going to take a closer look at the trucks, and let's start with this one. Now I do like the colour scheme on this, and again like I said, I went for the pink decals. I think they look really cool. Got a very firm plastic front bumper with an LED light bar. We've got a wheelie bar on the back and a very flexible rear wing. So let's take a closer look under the body then. Now this is held on with Velcro instead of body clips. So under the body then, and we're going to get straight to it, we're going to talk about the most disappointing feature on this little truck. And if you haven't guessed what I'm talking about these horrible friction shocks. And just look how bouncy this thing is. I don't know why they do it. Why do they keep including friction shocks with a lot of these ready to run cheap RC cars? So the shocks are terrible, but this thing does come with metal CVDs at the front. We've got metal dog bones on the rear. We've also got a metal center drive shaft. This thing also has metal gears, metal diffs and ball bearings throughout. We have got a plastic chassis. Tyre wise, well, they're really firm. They almost feel like hard plastic, and I don't think they're going to grip very well. And feeling the plastic as well, it does feel really brittle. And comparing this to something like high boxing, the plastic they use is incredibly flexible, whereas this really doesn't feel like it's going to last very long. So let's talk about the electronics then. Now we have got a 45 amp brushless ESC, which I do believe is 3S capable. We've got a 28, 47, 4200 kV brushless motor. Finally, a 3-wire servo. So yeah, not a great start, and even though this thing does look really cool, I don't think it's going to perform well. So moving on, let's take a a closer look at this one. Now on the back we've got a very firm and rigid rear wing. With this one the front bumper is very similar, and again you do get an LED light bar. The slightly disappointing thing with this one, we don't get a rear bumper and there's just a huge gap at the rear. I don't really like that. Now one feature that I do really like is these body clips with the retainers. We very rarely see that when it comes to cheap RC cars. So let's get the body off and let's take a closer look underneath. So taking a look underneath, and does this look familiar to you? Everything is screaming WL Toys, and it reminds me of my old best friend, the 144001. So this is nice to see straight away. This one has proper metal oil-filled adjustable shocks. You see how bouncy the other one was? Well, take a look at this. This is how it should be done. So on the front we have got metal CVDs, dog bones on the rear, and these do look really thin, and in the past I have found these bend easily. Now this thing also has metal gears and diffs, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of grease in those diffs, so that would definitely be worth checking if you do buy one of these. With this one we've also got a proper metal chassis, but there's no hex hardware here, which is slightly disappointing. We've got adjustable turnbuckles, metal shock towers front and rear, metal centre drive shaft, full bearings throughout. We've also got a very nice battery tray on this one, and you can actually extend this to accept longer packs. Finally, the wheels and tyres. Now these things are a lot nicer than the previous one. They're a lot softer and they should grip a little bit better. So electronics on this one, we have a 390 sized brushed motor, a 2-in-1 35 amp brushed ESC and receiver, finally a 5-wire servo, which isn't great because it does make upgrading a little bit difficult. Now that's pretty much it. I think we've covered all of the features on these little trucks, but if you want to check out the full spec, I will leave some links down below. So first, let's see how fast both of these trucks go. We're going to do a 2S speed run using the included batteries. Right, so let's do a quick 2S speed test with the SMRC version first. It's full throttle. I'm in my little car park again, but it is big enough to do a speed test on 2S. Full throttle. Now it does feel very bouncy. Immediately that is noticeable. Right, I wonder what we're going to get with this. And this is the brushless version. You can also get this in a brushed. Popped a little wheelie there. Right, we'll bring it back. Let's see what we got. Right, so we're going to hit stop and read. We got 24 miles per hour. And when you compare that to some of the other cars in this price range, it's actually quite slow. So next up, let's find out how fast this one goes. Right, so moving on, let's see how fast the JJRC one will go. I think we're going to see mid-20s. It feels fairly quick actually. And again, I really don't like the feel of this transmitter. It feels like there's a bit of a delay with the steering. It's not very nice. Now this definitely doesn't feel as bouncy because it has got the proper oil-filled shocks. But I wonder what we're going to get. Right, let's bring it back. Let's see what we got. Okay, so we're going to hit stop and read. So we got 22 with this one, which is a little bit slower, but it definitely handles better. Right, so next we're going to see how the SMRC 910 performs off-road. And as expected, yeah, not very well because it's super bouncy. Take a look at this. Now this is really annoying actually, because I think if this did have proper oil-filled shocks right out of the box, it would perform so much better. I really don't know why they keep doing this, because oil-filled shocks really aren't that much more expensive, and people will actually be prepared to pay a little bit more for that privilege. So power-wise, it actually feels quite nice, and even though it wasn't very fast on-road, it certainly feels like more than enough off-road. All it wants to do is bounce around, and it just feels like a bit of a chore to drive around. And when you compare this to something like an MJX Hyper Go, well, this thing doesn't stand a chance. I found one of the biggest issues for me with this truck was every time it flipped over, this body would keep coming off. I'm not a huge fan of the Velcro system they've got going on there, and I think they should have just stuck with body clips. So yeah, I have to say, a bit of a disappointment with this one, but let's see how the JJRC performs. Now I knew this one would handle a lot better off-road compared to the previous one because it is a little bit heavier, the tyres feel nicer, and it's also got proper oil-filled shocks, and they really help when it comes to absorbing all of those little impacts. It's not bouncing around, and although the steering doesn't feel great, it certainly feels a lot nicer to drive. I just wish it had a little bit more power. It just feels like it's craving a little bit more punch. But you have to remember, I've reviewed so many cheap RC cars on my channel. We're probably talking about hundreds now, so it's very easy for me to compare this to the likes of High Boxing and MJX, and at the moment, well, those guys are absolutely smashing it. So yeah, much better effort with this one, but it's certainly not great. So there we go then guys, that was two brand new ARRMA inspired knockoffs. This time it was the Outcast, and whilst these things look really cool, well, as you see in the video, they don't really perform well. Now I think the SMRC wins when it comes to looks. It certainly looks really cool, it's just a shame it doesn't perform well. And then we have the JJRC, which doesn't look as good, but it definitely performs better. And that is thanks to having proper oil-filled shocks, and even though the power isn't really there, it still handles really well. Now would I actually go out and buy either of these trucks? Well, when you've got the likes of the MJX Hyper Go and the High Boxing cars, I think it's really tough competition. But if you do like the look of both of these cars, if I had to pick one, I think I would go with the JJRC. And it's not always about outright speed. Handling is super important when it comes to RC cars too. Now I think these cars do appeal to beginners starting out in the hobby, and if you do buy one of these, get this one and then do a brushless upgrade later. So there we go then guys, I really hope you enjoyed seeing both of these trucks in action. Let me know in the comments section what you make of both of them. Cheers for watching, see you on the next one, take care. Now if you want to check out two really cool alternatives to these trucks, click on the top or the bottom video now.